Sure. Either way. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Verona. I'm very proud to be the Dean of Seattle University School of Law. It is my honor to welcome you on behalf of Seattle University School of Law and Seattle University itself. Before we begin, some housekeeping. Seattle University School of Law does not support nor oppose political candidates. The views expressed are those of the candidates alone. Seattle University School of Law is only sponsoring and hosting this event, which we are proud to do. Tonight, we are honored to host the two candidates running for this position in discourse and debate. I would like to thank the Access to Justice Institute and Assistant Dean Cindy Jung for organizing today's event. Next, I would like to thank and introduce our moderator for this evening, Professor Deborah Ahrens, our Vice Dean for Intellectual Life and Professor of Law. We do not have time to go through Professor Ahrens' very impressive bio, but suffice it to say that she is a nationally renowned scholar and expert in criminal law and procedure and a master teacher and celebrated teacher. Our two candidates tonight are Leesa Manion, current Chief of Staff for the King County Prosecuting Attorney, and Jim Ferrell, the Mayor of Federal Way. I thank them for participating in today's very important event, and thank all of you for attending. Vice Dean Ahrens, the podium is yours.
All right, so thank you to Dean Verona for that generous introduction. I also like to thank all of you from inside of and outside of our law school community for coming and attending this evening. Before we begin, we do have some guidelines for this evening's debate. First, each candidate is going to have an opportunity to present a 2-minute opening statement. I'm then going to ask a series of 10 questions. For each of those questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. The candidate who answers first will have 30 seconds to respond to the other candidate's answer. And then we will move on to the next question. And the next question, the other candidate will begin with a 2-minute response. 2 minutes for that, 30-minute response, 30-second response to that. The parties will rotate back and forth throughout the remaining questions. Other guidelines, neither candidate may interrupt each other. No candidate may belittle or make ad hominem comments. The moderator can interrupt if any of these rules are violated or if the candidate has exceeded their time. There will be no live audience questions. Please no heckling or cheering, and please save your applause until the end. Also, please no talking amongst each other during the event or flash photography. Before we conclude, each of the candidates will make a 2-minute closing statement. Before we gathered here this evening, a coin toss was performed to see who would go first this evening. Jim Ferrell won the coin toss, and so we will begin with his opening statement, and he will answer tonight's first question first. So candidates have asked me to call them by their first name. So Jim, please go ahead and make your opening statement.
Thank you, Dean. And thank you, everybody, for being here. We very, very much appreciate it. Thank Leesa for being here as well. And I want to let you know, it's great to be back. Actually, my wife Wendy and I were married just right down the sidewalk there at St. Ignatius Chapel 24 years ago. So I went down there and saw it again. It's just a beautiful campus. So thank you for having us. I want to let you know that I'm running for prosecutor because I'm very concerned about the state of public safety in our community. I spent 19 years as a prosecutor. 3 years as a city prosecutor in the city of Renton, and 16 years at King County, where I was a senior deputy prosecutor, headed up the first ever domestic violence court unit, handled thousands of cases, hundreds of jury trials over that 16 years. I was one of the leaders in the office. About 9 years ago, I was elected to be the elected mayor of Federal Way. And I lead a city of 100,000 people, Federal Way is growing, 150 law enforcement officers, police officers, and $100 million budget, 600 employees. It's a big operation. It's something now I'm in my 3rd term, and so I've got experience running that department. But I can tell you the reason why I'm running is, like I said, I'm very concerned about the direction public safety is going in our region. And I think I've just got really a unique background, not only as I was on the city council for 10 years, a mayor for 10 years, a senior deputy prosecutor. I really have a holistic view of how to approach this office and a vision on how to address that. I can tell you that in evidence of my concern, This just last month, August of 2022, we had a record number of call-outs of homicides in King County. All to 28 homicides, in which the NDOT, the most dangerous offender unit, that's the homicide unit in the prosecutor's office, it gets called out to the scene. 28 in 1 month. There's a crisis in King County, and I would ask for your support to be the next King County prosecutor. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Making our community safer, reducing property crime, and protecting victims, it takes proven experience and hands-on leadership. Serious challenges like the pandemic, reduced police resources, and our housing and opioid crises has challenged the vitality of our King County communities and businesses. The challenges are great, but we can and must do better. I have dedicated 27 years of my career to public safety and to public service. As a career prosecutor, I'm the only candidate that has built and implemented effective crime prevention strategies. For me, it's about ensuring that our communities are safe and supported. It's about identifying common ground, building strong coalitions, and working in collaboration to get results. As the Chief of Staff, here are some recent outcomes that I have delivered for public safety. I have enhanced victim services by adding 10 victim advocate positions, partnered with business leaders and city attorneys to reduce organized retail theft and property crime, secured funding to track and combat gun violence, formed a hate crimes unit, formed a unit dedicated to reviewing police shooting cases, and when the pandemic closed courts, I'm now hard at work addressing a historic backlog of charged cases. And we still have important work to do. And we know that finger pointing and blame will not improve our communities. Instead, it takes innovation and a focus on outcomes. And as your next prosecuting attorney, I will continue to lead on these critical issues, and I will hit the ground running to build a fair and transparent justice system that protects public safety and promotes racial justice. As a woman, I've been cautioned that I will have to defend my record of leadership against mischaracterization. So tonight I will answer important questions, and I will come to you with substance, not rhetoric. I will show you my experience tackling tough issues. I will show you my values and my authentic self, and I would be honored to earn your vote.
Thank you. So we'll start with our first question. The King County Prosecuting Attorney Office's mission is as follows. The mission of the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office is to do justice. We exercise the power given to us by the people with fairness and humility. We serve our diverse community, support victims and families, and hold individuals accountable. We develop innovative and collaborative solutions for King County and the state of Washington. Is the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office doing a good job at fulfilling its mission? What would you change? So we'll start with Jeff.
Well, there are many dedicated people that work at the King County Prosecutor's Office, and what I would say is, unfortunately, the answer to several of those is no. With a 5,000 case backlog that includes 500 sexual assaults, over 180 murders, we're not doing justice to those individuals, and there's no discernible plan or publicized plan to address that. When we don't have standards for the filing disposition standards, so truly hold people accountable, we're failing in that mission. And when the King County Prosecutor's Office launches a juvenile justice program with no notice to any of the cities in King County, that's not collaborative. So unfortunately, that's where the office has fallen short with regard to its mission statement. But I believe that actually we can build those coalitions, we can get that case log down, backlog down, and we can make sure that we adjust the filing standards to meet community expectations, because that's what we do. That's what we should do, because people deserve to be safe and to feel safe. Thank you.
Would our audience members be okay if we sit? I mean, I'm happy to stand, but it seems like we can sit since they provided chairs. As the Chief of Staff, I have dedicated my career to building a modern and thoughtful and effective criminal legal system from a system that wasn't originally designed to serve all members of our community. Here are the things that we are doing well. Despite what my opponent thinks, we actually have filing and disposition standards that we publicize. We share them with defense, we share them with law enforcement, and we place them on our website. We also periodically review our filing standards to ensure that they are reflecting the modern values of our community. You know, we also do a very good job advocating for victims and survivors of crime. We just added 10 new victim advocate positions to ensure that a greater number of victims are receiving services while cases are pending, especially since we have a backlog of filed felony cases. You know, we also recognize that accountability is not a one-size-fits-all model, that we absolutely take a hard stance on people who commit violent crimes, sexual assault, gun crimes, and repeat property offenses. But we also know that we can address root causes, and that's why we support our therapeutic alternatives like drug court, mental health court, and veterans court. And we also know that in order to have long-lasting results and solutions, we have to address root causes, and we have to offer community-based services and treatment on demand so that not everyone has to go through our criminal justice system to get help. Now, here are some things that we can do better. You know, we can expand our definition of justice. We know that we have racial disparities in our criminal justice system, and we can invite the community to our table to help us dismantle those and to share data and to be transparent about our progress. You know, we can also, when we are in the process of expanding and modernizing our victim services, to ensure that everyone gets access to services, and that includes the family members. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll have to-
You bet. Well, I'm fully familiar with the fads. I filed cases for years in the prosecutor's office in Main Street, special assault, domestic violence. I'm the only person in this race that has ever tried a case or even handled a criminal case. I've gathered together the mayors of dozens of King County cities to address the King County prosecutor's office in regard to what was happening in regard to the filing and disposition standards. You know what happened as a result of that? Nothing. Nothing changed. Nothing moved. And every time we've gone to the prosecutor's office and asked for help with regard to making sure that people in our community weren't victimized, we got nothing in response.
All right, for our second question, this one, Leesa will start. Prosecutors have broad discretion in deciding to file charges. If elected, what offenses or strategies will you focus on? For example, how will you address misdemeanor offenses?
Thank you. You know, the lion's share of the work in the prosecuting attorney's office is addressing felony crime. We have felony and juvenile jurisdiction in all parts of King County, and we only have misdemeanor jurisdiction in the areas of unincorporated King County, the parts that aren't part of cities. You know, public safety is my #1 priority, and under my leadership, this is how we will handle cases. We know that accountability is not a one-size-fits-all model. And, you know, for those who engage in violent crime, sexual assault, gun crime, and repeated property offenses, we absolutely will use the tools of our criminal justice system to hold those individuals accountable. And in order to do this, we are going to rely on our filing and disposition standards, and we will be at roll calls to ensure that our law enforcement partners and also that our communities understand what they are. You know, we also have to address root causes. For individuals who are struggling with mental health, substance use disorder, we have to ensure that we have adequate capacity for our mental health court, drug court, and veterans court. We also have to increase capacity to community-based treatment service and offer services on demand. And you know, I believe in the power of diversion because the data shows us that it works. Over the past 2 decades, law enforcement referrals for juvenile crimes could you please stop coughing while I'm talking? So we know that juvenile referrals have decreased by 90%. And it goes in alignment with the effective and proven diversion programs that we have built in partnership with the community. And we can have those same results on the adult side of things.
Sorry about that, Leesa. It's just a chronic thing I do, but periodically I'll try to suppress it. I may need another water. Justice and accountability is at the center of all these decisions. And we need to make sure, whether it's felonies or misdemeanors, that we're meeting community expectations. But I also think that sometimes it is critically important we handle felonies, but misdemeanors matter as well. And, you know, I handled the first ever domestic violence unit, probably half my 16 years in the prosecutor's office handling domestic violence cases. You know what almost every one of those homicides and domestic violence have in common? A misdemeanor prior. And anybody who's ever handled these cases know that. Misdemeanors matter. It is critically important that we staff those and get those right. Also, you think about the DUI offenders, and if you think the universe of DUI offenders, eventually those individuals, if they're not handled correctly, will go out and kill individuals. So what I have to say as well is that we want to make sure that our filing and disposition standards reflect the expectations of the community, but we want to make sure as well that quality of life crime, burglary, robbery, car theft, those are the kind of things. If you have your car stolen, your home broken into, those are quality of life crimes. And I want to let you know that the law enforcement agencies of this community, of this region, are terribly concerned about what's happening in our county and about how those cases are being resolved. And that's why, if you take a look, I've been endorsed by the police guilds of Seattle, King County, Bellevue, Kent, Des Moines, Federal Way, because they're concerned about the direction, as are the 15 mayors across King County that have endorsed my campaign. They lead cities, they lead police departments. They're concerned, and justifiably so. Thank you.
Of course, misdemeanor crimes are important, and of course, we prosecute DUIs and domestic violence assaults. And, you know, an effective way of addressing misdemeanor crime is, of course, partnership. So when our new city attorney took office, I reached across the street and I brokered a partnership. And for individuals who are systematically preying upon businesses and communities, we can, in the right circumstances, aggregate the value of loss and take some of those cases and file them as felonies. We can also trade notes on the individuals who are cycling in and out of our systems. Thank you.
All right, so our third question, criminal justice reform experts say that for reforms to be successful, you need buy-in from the community. What reforms do you support and what reforms do you oppose? Let me start with Joe.
All right, thank you. Buy-in is absolutely essential, right? People support what they help create. I can tell you what that's why my fellow mayors, if you take a look at my endorsements, all the dozens of mayors and elected officials that have endorsed my campaign and law enforcement agencies, it's because we were astonished to learn and stunned to learn that the King County Prosecutor's Office initiated a juvenile justice program, RCP, Restorative Community Pathways, with zero notice to any city, in any law enforcement agency. We found out about it almost by accident. And we tried to ask over and over and over, what is this program? We were told repeatedly, they wouldn't give us a straight answer. And I have to tell you, it was very concerning. In fact, when I find out, as the mayor of a city of 100,000 people, the way I found out about it was in a Zoom call. And when I asked how long it had been in place, it had 6 weeks it had been in place. Now keep in mind that the King County Prosecutor's Office has exclusive jurisdiction on these are our cases, and that had been set up. So I can tell you that yes, buy-in is important. Body worn camera is critical. No vascular restraints. Making sure that I think I-940 has been a great, as a person who leads a police department, having other agencies investigate fatal agencies and the objective manner in which those investigations done is absolutely paramount. The trust of the people is absolutely important, but so is collaboration, and collaboration is key. When we talk about bringing together coalitions, I've already done that. Take a look at my website and all the people and all the cities that have joined this coalition. So I do think that we are at a point in which reforms are being made. They're critically important reforms to make sure that we are doing justice out in the community. But there has to be buy-in, there has to be collaboration. And we went repeatedly back to the King County Prosecutor's Office and said, we need to make sure that there's a case number, that there's some sort of tracking, some sort of report, nothing. Not only did we get told no, now they're going to roll it out for adults. That's next. And it's just deeply troubling. Thank you.
You know, I would modify the observation. I think that reforms could be effective without community buy-in, but they wouldn't be trusted. You know, and under my leadership, I would invite the participation of our BIPOC and marginalized and business communities, because when we craft justice behind closed doors, it's not fair, it's not transparent, and it doesn't feel fair and transparent. And by inviting the participation of our communities, not only can we learn from their lived experiences, but we need their good ideas, and we need their leadership, and most importantly, we need their trust. You know, I'm proud of the work that I've done with our community. In partnership with the community, I was a co-founding partner of Choose 180, and we have built proven and effective diversion programs that have reduced juvenile crimes to all-time lows. And with regard to restorative community pathways, my opponent's not sharing all of the facts with you. In our state, we have mandatory diversion for all juvenile first-time misdemeanors, So restorative community pathways is an immediate response to juvenile behavior. It was supported by all 9 of our King County Council members, and we absolutely shared notice about how it was implemented. Not only does RCP meet our mandatory legal obligations under the state of Washington, it also offers services to harmed parties, young people, and their families in their communities, in their schools, on weekends and on evenings. And with all due respect to our judges, I don't know a single judge that does that. So absolutely, we can have reforms, but we get the best reforms when we invite community participation. That's buy-in.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, sorry, I got this thing right. Oh, sorry. All right, 30 seconds. Okay, so thank you. I'm glad you talked about the difference between misdemeanors and felonies in the RCP program. Yeah, well, we wouldn't have a problem with misdemeanors. It's the PowerPoint presentation that was provided to me breathlessly by the detective and the chief of police that ran up to my office, who showed me this, who had just been informed that RCP included residential burglary, commercial burglary, felony assault, robbery, bringing a gun to school. What this means is no case number, no judge, no check back, no report, and the head, unacceptable.
All right, for our 4th question, we start with Leesa. What, if anything, should a prosecutor do to address the root causes of crime?
You know, if we want to have long-term solutions and lasting results, we absolutely have to address root causes. You know, for individuals who are suffering from substance use disorder, mental health disorders, behavioral health issues, if we want the behavior to stop, we have to offer treatment. And we can do that by making sure that we are honest about the size of the need in our community, that we increase the capacity and access to therapeutic courts, that we also increase the access to community-based services, and that we offer treatment on demand so that not everyone has to go to our criminal legal system to get help. And when we talk about root causes, we know that homelessness is one of the biggest challenges facing our region right now. A few weeks ago, I heard my opponent tell me that that was not the role of the prosecutor. But as a leader and a concerned citizen in King County, I don't think I can turn my back on one of the most important issues facing our community. And when we as leaders work together to address homelessness and reduce homelessness, we will have the automatic impact of reducing crime. We know that people experiencing homelessness are vulnerable and disproportionately victims of crime, and not everyone experiencing homelessness has committed a crime. Now, these are things that I learned from my old boss, Norm Mailing. He understood the power of addressing root causes, which is why he started King County's drug court, and is also why he worked to reduce prison sentence for drug crimes to reinvest into savings. I'm really proud to have been endorsed by the Mailing family because they trust me with his values and his legacy.
All right, thank you. Obviously, yes, the King County prosecutor drives outcomes and they make sure that they have resolutions, the conditions of sentence when there's a conviction, to make sure that those, whether it's drug addiction, alcohol addiction, mental health issues, whatever the underlying is. Homelessness is a symptom of larger issues. And, you know, people aren't, the problem isn't homelessness. People are homeless because they've got a mental health issue, a drug and alcohol issue. They've got a whole series of actions that have occurred there. So outcomes need to address how do we get individuals out of crisis and get back going the other direction. The question I think that my opponent, Leesa, was talking about was, they were talking about housing. Well, I've tried hundreds of cases and I can guarantee you the judge never asked me, what are you gonna do for the housing of the defendant? That's not what the prosecutor's office does. Prosecutor's office holds individuals accountable and sets in the conditions of sentence, the conditions, don't take drugs, get chemical dependency, mental health treatment, to get the kind of help they need to get out of crisis. But I think, you know, clearly what you wanna make sure is, what is the core mission of the King County Prosecutor's Office? The core mission of the King County Prosecutor's Office is to do justice, to seek justice relentlessly, and to never stop that process. But let's not get far afield here and say that it's not the job of the King County Prosecutor's Office to find people housing. There are plenty of other advocates for that. So that was really the context in which that was said. Thank you.
I am proud to be endorsed by 200 organizations and individuals and every King County Democratic organization that is endorsing in this race. And it's because key leaders like Bruce Ferrell, Lynn Robinson, Val Constantine, former Governor Gary Locke, they understand a little bit about my integrity, my ability to collaborate and to deliver results. They know that I won't turn my back on important issues and that I will stand with other leaders to address and tackle tough issues and to bring solutions to the table.
All right, our fifth question. So Jim will start. If elected, what, if anything, would you change in regard to the relationship of the King County Prosecutor's Office with the defense bar?
Absolutely nothing. I think that the defense bar plays an indispensable role. I had absolutely fantastic relationships with the defense bar, and they were based on candor, transparency, fairness, respect. I think the entire system is dependent on to make sure that there's zealous advocacy for defendants. And in fact, I can tell you that as a prosecutor, when I was either negotiating cases or when I got a case, that I had to work up for trial, one of the things I would always do, and when you're doing this, you have case after case after case. There were times in which I had 8 months of every day being in trial, one after the other, back to backs. And I can tell you that I really relied on the defense investigators. When you get a chance, if you ever get a chance to talk to me, ask me about the CSI investigation that we did where someone was shot by the Seattle Police Department. He was facing 3 counts of assault first degree. And we worked with the CSI unit and recreated the scene to make sure that this person faced a much, much reduced sentence because seeking the truth was what was really important. I had a robbery case not far from here in which, the defendant was saying it was a different story. We went over there and he drew a diagram of the back of the room. And I went over there and with the detective, we figured out the individual, the defendant was telling the truth. And we got that guy out of custody as fast as we put him in custody. So that's the thing, is that we're going to start at the King County Prosecutor's Office, a true unit, not a committee, a unit, a conviction integrity unit to make sure that search for the truth never stops, whether it's pre-trial or even post-trial, because that's really what matters. It's the truth and it's a search for justice. And I love that job. I worked for Norm Ayling. Norm Ayling hired me in 1998, and I can tell you what I loved about him was the only thing, and the office and the whole ethos of the office was show up every day and do the right thing and seek justice. And that's what this job is about. Thank you.
Just a quick correction. We actually formed a conviction integrity unit about 5 years ago. As the chief of staff, I've always encouraged our office to have an open door policy to build strong and healthy relationships with our public defenders. And I've heard firsthand from our public defenders that the work in our early plea unit is really good, but that there is a kink in the timing that doesn't work for all of the charged individuals. And we can work on that together to figure out what it is that's creating the holdup, because we're not having the intended impacts that we want. And we need to do this especially because we have a backlog of charged cases and we all have a shared interest in the fair and efficient resolution of cases. Speaking of backlog, we have to work together with public defenders to ensure that we can bring the fair and efficient resolution of cases. And we can do that in a way that protects victims and also protects the constitutional rights of the accused. We also have to work with public defenders to dismantle the racial disparities that are in our criminal legal system. We are all susceptible to both implicit and explicit bias, including defense. And if we openly acknowledge that we have racial disparities and we actively together work to guard against bias, we will create a more fair and just system. Prosecutors and defense have a lot of ground, and we want a lot of the same things. We want accountability to be proportionate to the harm. We want victims and survivors to have access to healing and restorative practices. And we also want our communities to be safe and supported. There are a lot of areas where we have the ability for increased partnership. And when we invite public defenders to the table and we keep our doors open, we will improve not just justice, but we will also improve the trust in the system from all of our communities.
Well, what I would say is the defense bar, as I said, is critically important with this. But one of the things as a prosecutor that I did is I found myself, there were times in which I was negotiating cases and the defense attorney would come in And, oftentimes, there's mitigation, or there's just an absolute, hey, this person didn't do it. And on all those circumstances, it's critically important to listen. You guys are going to practice law someday. The best advice I can give you is listen to people, listen to your witnesses, listen to your officers, listen to the things that make sense or that don't. Thank you.
All right, we are at our 6th question, so Leesa will start. What is the prosecutor's role in ensuring police accountability?
For me, policing and police accountability is a common ground issue. We know that when we are afraid and we call 911, we want a response. And that might be from a social worker and it might be from a law enforcement officer, but we can let trained dispatch decide that. We also want police who know how to de-escalate volatile situations. And police who lie, who engage in biased policing or abuse their authority, we want them off the force. All of us want that, including police. I supported the reforms that were brought about by Initiative I-940, and it is why I formed a public integrity unit that is dedicated to reviewing officer-involved shooting and police use of force cases. And because of this work, I intentionally declined to seek the endorsement of any police skills, because the review of those cases would not appear fair or feel fair and unbiased if I'm endorsed by police unions. Now, I've heard this mischaracterized that I have a problem with police, but that's not true. Not only do I support good, strong policing, I've been endorsed by well-regarded police leaders like former Seattle Police Chief Jim Pugel, former King County Sheriff Sue Rohr, retired Major Jim Gradden, retired Captain Tank Gleason, retired Chief Faye Brooks. And my partner is a retired assistant police chief who had a long 35-year career in law enforcement. And from his lived experience, I understand how important and how dangerous this work can be. He has been stabbed, he has been shot, and he believes in police reform, just like the police leaders who've endorsed me.
Well, I'm the endorsement of the King County Police Officers Guild, the Seattle Police Officers Guild, Bellevue, Des Moines, Kent, Federal Way, represents thousands of officers. And I'm proud of their endorsement. I can tell you that I was on the city council for 10 years as mayor in the city of Federal Way, then mayor now for 9 years, and now running. And I can tell you that I've had to terminate officers, I've had to take adverse action against officers, and prior support from those organizations plays no role whatsoever. In fact, we take money from labor organizations. I've got a ton of labor organizations that have endorsed me, and my opponent does as well. But at some point, we'll have to negotiate with labor unions, or we'll have to deal with them, and that doesn't make us biased in any way. So, this is about political support. These are about officers that go out every day to make sure that when you call 911, or somebody you love and you care about calls 911 shows up. And I can tell you, they are concerned about the direction that law enforcement, that the laws are going, with regard to the pursuit laws, the de facto legalization of drugs that is causing really the spilling over into violence in our community. I get the calls at 3 o'clock in the morning from the police chief. There's been essentially the law of unintended consequences of what's happened with car theft. Car theft in 1 year has gone up 88% statewide. And that's because people know now all they have to do is push the gas down and the police can't pursue them. We needed a prosecutor to go down to Olympia and stand up and say no. We needed a prosecutor to, just like Norm used to, and go down, whether it was for drug court or, the first time Norm went down there for drugs was in the cocaine epidemic in the 1980s, and they elevated delivery of crack cocaine to a level 8 offense, but then he went back down and got it adjusted down. He went back down there and adjusted the car theft initiative with regard to car theft. Because you used to be able to steal 7 cars in this county or in this state without going to prison. You need a King County prosecutor that's going to stand up and lock arms with law enforcement and the community. Thank you.
While we're on the topic of police endorsements, I would question the judgment of anyone who would stand with Mike Solon, who is actively fighting against transparency and against democracy by not releasing the names of the Seattle police officers who were present at the insurrection.
All right, we are going to be moving on to question 7. Before we do, I just want to remind our audience that we do have ground rules, that we're not going to be applauding or speaking while candidates are speaking. So number 7, there's overwhelming evidence to support the contention that the criminal legal system disproportionately affects Black, Latino, Latina, and Indigenous communities. Do you agree? And what will you do about this? Start with Jim.
It's the criminal justice system, and the criminal justice system has disproportionately affected communities of color. We need to identify that and address it. But those factors, if you take a look at where the fulcrum point is on this, most officers, as you likely know, or will learn at some point, they don't initiate much of these contacts. They're called to the scene by 911 operators. The fulcrum point, the whole thing comes down in regard to disproportionality, comes down with regard to identification and how did initial contact occur. And that's where we really want to focus our attention on. And I think the prosecutor, when filing cases, I think I'm the only one in this race that's ever filed a case. I filed hundreds of cases, if not thousands. And you really need to address and make sure that the initial contact and the initial identification is free of bias. And that's really where that comes into effect. And so you can't just snap your fingers and say, we're going to, make it, the officers get called into the scene and that's what they get. But I think the identification procedures are key. And I think zero tolerance for misconduct is also one of the key issues where you've got, contact that appears to be, racially motivated. We need to keep track of that. We need to make sure that we're not calling officers that have engaged in misconduct. But I think with regard to, and these things actually get themselves ferreted out during trial. During trial, there's something called the 3-6 motion, which is either based on, it's a suppression motion for either based on probable cause or identification suppression. And that's where a lot of this findings have to be made. That's where you can really drill down and make sure that what occurred is not unjust. And that's actually where a true conviction integrity unit. I've spoken to people in the King County Prosecutor's Office that know, and there is a committee, but there is no formalized unit. Go to the King County Prosecutor's Office with regard to the conviction integrity unit. Thank you.
As a candidate who stands to serve as the first woman and the first person of color to hold this seat, this issue is deeply personal to me. We know that there are racial disparities in the criminal justice system, and unless we think system actors are intentionally creating those disparities, the data alone shows us that there is institutional racism baked into our system. And in order to dismantle racial disparities, we must be intentional, we must share and examine the data, and we have to openly discuss race and understand how it intersects with our criminal justice system. Here are some things that I have done to dismantle the racism in our system. I launched our office's first Equity Social Justice Committee. I implemented mandatory implicit bias training for all employees to improve the fair and impartial decision-making. I implemented mandatory cultural competency training to understand race and understand how it intersects with our criminal justice system. And we still have important work to do. Under my leadership, we were the first prosecuting attorney's office in the state to launch a public-facing data dashboard that shares the racial demographics of referrals and charged cases. And we can also apply a race equity tool to our work and invite the community's participation in this process. Under my leadership, we will continue to address this issue because we know we have important work to do.
All right.
Okay. So our 8th question, we'll start with Leesa. Reducing racial inequalities in the criminal justice system begins at a leadership level. How diverse is your current leadership team, and what steps have you taken to promote people with diverse backgrounds to leadership roles?
Again, this issue is deeply personal to me. And as the Chief of Staff, I am proud to have built the most diverse team in the history of the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. So my personal leadership team is the number of 28 individuals. And of those 28, 23 are women, BIPOC, and LGBTQIA. I am proud of this. When we have a diverse and inclusive workforce, we serve our community better. And I'm hard at work to ensure that we can bring this same type of diversity to all parts of our office. I am working with our HR department, and we are revamping how we advertise positions, how we hire into the office, and more importantly, we are doing the hard work of determining how we retain lawyers and staff of color and how we are promoting in an equitable fashion. I also launched a pay equity study because I had an inkling that there were women and people of color who were not getting paid on par with their male and white counterparts. And it turned out that that was true. And not only did we write those salaries, in many instances, we made those changes retroactive because it was the right thing to do. We still have important work to do, but this is personal for me and it's important to me, and under my leadership, we will continue to do this work.
Well, over the past 8.5 years as the mayor, I'm proud of the diversity of the team that we have at the city of Federal Way. In fact, one of the very first decisions I made at the city was to elevate one of the deputy chiefs to the chief of police, who was the first ever Korean American police chief in the lower 48 of the United States. I'm the first ever mayor in the city of Federal Way to create the diversity, equity, inclusion coordinator position. And we're working on recruiting more officers of color. And I think ultimately it takes intentionality. We've, over the course of the past 8 years, we've had people come and go, but I can tell you that we've had a really diverse leadership group, and you really have to approach it with intentionality, and it has to be a major priority. We also need a police force that represents the community it represents, that is a good reflection of the community it represents, and proportionality, and we've taken deliberate steps to address that as well. Thank you.
At the heart of this conversation is the notion that representation matters. With your help, I will be the first woman and the first person of color to hold this seat, and I will be the second Korean American elected prosecutor in our country. And out of the thousands of elected prosecutors in the United States, there are currently 4 that are Asian American, and I would be number 5. Representation matters.
All right, our 9th question, so we begin with Jim. The Children and Family Justice Center Youth Detention Facility, just down the street from the law school, is slated to close by 2025. Studies have routinely shown that providing supportive community-driven approaches, especially for young people, are more effective at reducing violent crime than law enforcement intervention. As the prosecuting attorney, what policies could you implement or expand on that would be in this evidence?
Well, first I would say that diversion programs are absolutely essential. You can't have, whether it's misdemeanor or at the felony level, at the juvenile level, programs related crimes without a diversion program to help people get course corrected, especially with people with very little history, and that's really where diversion programs really are centered on. I can tell you this, that the closure of that facility and you know, this zero youth detention by 2025 is not, what I say, not tethered to reality. What we need to make sure is that when somebody goes out and commits a violent offense with a firearm, commits a violent robbery, a violent crime, they need to be held. It's for the safety of not only the community, the families of the people they victimized, but also the greater community. In Federal Way, we had a strong arm robbery with 2 juveniles this year, where they held everybody in the pawn shop in Federal Way captive. They got booked into the King County Jail. They got electronic home detention. One of them got out, is now suspected of committing a murder in Pierce County. So that's what, you really need to make sure that when you have people that are committing violent crimes, you can't wish this away and you can't look the other way. And I have to tell you that the RCP, soon to be for adults and now for juveniles, you have to have benchmarks of transparency and accountability. You absolutely have to have a case number. You have to have some way to track these. They have to appear before a judge. You need a report. Did they show up? Did they do what they're required to do? That is the hallmark of transparency. We have talked several times about drug court, mental health court, and domestic violence court. You know what all those treatment courts have in common? Report back, case numbers, judges, accountability, transparency. Public dollars are being spent. None of that is in place. So on day one, what I'll need to do, and I've told the King County Prosecutor's Office, I could fix RCP in a day by adding some of those things and make sure that we get people course corrected back on track, but with accountability. Thank you.
I know that diversion works because the data tells us that it does. Police referrals for juvenile crime dropped by 90% over the past 2 decades, and for violent crime, that decrease was 70%. During this time, we didn't get tougher on crime, we didn't get softer on crime, we got smarter on juvenile crime. Restorative community pathways is a pre-filing juvenile diversion program, and it's also an effective crime reduction strategy that was unanimously approved by all 9 of our King County Council members. Washington State requires mandatory diversion for first-time misdemeanors, and RCP not only meets our county's legal obligation, but it also addresses some nonviolent first-time felony matters. Early data shows that RCP is working. The recidivism rate for RCP is 8%. compared to the 58% recidivism rate of someone who is prosecuted and results in a stay at our juvenile rehabilitation facility. RCP isn't a free pass. Participants are expected to work with community to repair the harm that they've caused, and the King County Executive's Office has hired and partnered with 9 community-based nonprofits that work with the young people, their families, and the harmed parties in their communities, in their school, on nights and on weekends. And this also represents a historic investment in victim services. Not only does RCP serve the harmed party by offering them treatment and services, it also pays for out-of-pocket losses like insurance, deductibles, broken windows, and the repair of property. RCP is a less expensive, immediate, and more effective response to juvenile crime. And of the 254 youths who've been served by RCP and the 57 harmed parties, 90% report a change in behavior and healing.
The report provided to the King County Council just last week said that through March, out of the 271 people referred, 136 were in the process of being contacted. That's the public record. Nonviolent offenses? No. Robbery, gun offenses, residential burglary, felony assault. Those are the programs. And the head of the juvenile division said, we don't want to know what happens. Well, Google RCP in the Seattle Times, and take a look at the Seattle Times article. That's really what's happening.
All right, our final question. So we start with Leesa. What are the leading causes of wrongful convictions? If elected, what specific policies will you implement to safeguard against the risk that your office's work will result in a wrongful conviction?
We know that some of the causes for wrongful convictions are bias, both implicit and explicit, institutional racism, ineffective assistance of counsel, and we also know that there are power differentials between police and the accused, particularly as it relates to confessions. I'm an honest leader, and I will always be honest when we make a mistake, and we have the ability to correct those mistakes. One of the things I did as chief of staff is I led our office's very first review of our early 3 strikes cases, which disproportionately impacted Black men. And we successfully supported 17 petitions of clemency. And that important work led to statutory changes, removing robbery second degree as a strike offense, and also codifying the prosecutor's ability to go in and to change the sentence in certain cases to achieve a modern sense of justice that reflects our modern values and reflect the values of the communities that we serve. We have an obligation to our communities to ensure that we make sure that our system changes as our understanding around adolescent brain development, substance use disorder, mental health disorders evolves.
False confessions, identification. Identification is one of the key issues, and we need to make sure that when the prosecutor's office relies on an identification process that was not unduly suggestive, and that you follow best practices, whether it's the interview of the suspect and the witnesses, and that there aren't deceptive practices being used, but also best practices in regard to identification, like double-blind photo montages. Double-blind means the detective actually showing the montage doesn't even know who the supposed narrowed in on suspect is. I once had a case in which the name of the defendant was selected correctly according to who we thought was it, but it was the wrong person. How did that happen? Because there was an implicit bias somehow or another that was communicated. So we need to make sure that with these identification, these photo montages, what they call 6-packs, they use best practices. Fairness and objectivity is critical. And once, the reason why these types of procedures are so difficult is that once you get down that pathway and an identification has occurred, it's very difficult to sort of unwind that. And a botched identification is really systemically difficult to achieve, but it's important to keep digging and keep working on those things. And, I think when I said it before, but your job isn't done as a prosecutor even after you filed the case and you start negotiating. You have to continually investigate these cases and be curious and be collaborative with the defense attorney, because ultimately you're both officers of the court, and their team, your team, you're really what you're after is after the truth, and it's never too late to do the right thing. And I would also say, if you take a case on this, what's very instructive is the Bloodworth case out of Baltimore County, Maryland. Fascinating case in regard to confirmation bias, bad identification, and it's a good read in regard to innocent project. Thank you.
I'm glad my opponent mentioned the work that we've done to improve identification. Under my leadership, Mark Larson worked with leaders here at Seattle University, not only to lead the nation in how we changed and understood the science around identification, but we implemented best practices, not just here in Washington State, but all across the country. And also, I'm going to take a moment to just talk about our conviction integrity unit. We actually call ours the sentence review unit, because that way we look not only at potential wrongful convictions, but also sentences that were extremely long.
All right, thank you. So that concludes the question and answer portion of this event, and we're now going to move to closing statements. Again, each candidate will have 2 minutes, and again, Jim won the coin toss, so he will go first.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for hosting. Thank you we got a great audience, and thank you, Leesa, and thank you for your 27 years of service to the county. You know, I'm very honored to have the endorsements of key Democrats like our Congressman Adam Smith, several state representatives and senators, but the labor units that I've talked about, law enforcement. I'm not going to address the other issue. The person who leads the Seattle Police Department Guild represents over 1,000 Seattle police officers, and I'm not going to pursue that issue. Let me say that when we had a press conference last week, I was supported by thousands of law enforcement officers, but I'm also supported by the mayors that represent probably well over 1 million people in this county. And that's what I'd ask you to think about is we're running a grassroots bipartisan campaign to really get at justice and accountability. There was an optional question that I was hoping you were going to ask about what is justice. And I think justice is really, because that's really the key part of the whole thing. And it's a 3-part analysis. Is there accountability or punishment? Is there rehabilitation for the person that has done this? But the thing that's been lost over the course of the past few years is justice for the victim. And while justice is due the accused, it's also due to the accuser. And victims need to make sure whether it's monetary or a sense of justice, that the individual who has victimized them did not get away with this without some sort of sanction. And so this has been a tremendous honor to run for this. I absolutely love the job of Mayor of Federal Way. But I have run for this position because I felt it was my obligation and duty to do so, because I feel like the King County Prosecutor's Office is going in the wrong direction, unfortunately. And as is our county with regard to public safety. And I have the tools and the background and a vast reservoir of experience in criminal justice matters, hundreds of jury trials to draw from. And it's all centered on justice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you to Seattle University School of Law for hosting this forum, and thank you to all of our audience members for attending and for being with us here tonight. You know, the residents of King County deserve a prosecutor who shares their values and who is 100% committed to ensuring that our communities are safe and supported. A prosecutor who knows how to identify common ground and build strong and collaborative coalitions to get results. Residents deserve a prosecutor who will not criminalize the poor and unjustly incarcerate our communities of color, who will protect public safety by immediately addressing crime and also tackling root causes and working to reduce recidivism. Residents of King County deserve a prosecutor who will call out the inequities of our current system and also actively work to build a fair and transparent justice system that protects public safety, that promotes racial justice, and provides hope and opportunity for all parts of King County. I am that prosecutor, and I'm inviting you to walk on this journey with me, to be on the right side of history, and to continue to bring positive change to King County. With your help, I will be the first woman and the first person of color to hold this seat, and I would be honored and proud to have your vote.
All Great, thank you to both Leesa and Jim for joining us here today for this debate, to our outside of the Seattle University community members for joining us as well, and thanks in particular to all the students, staff, and faculty who I see out there who joined us for this event. Now would be an appropriate time to applaud.